At my brother's funeral, my parents didn't cry over his coffin. They pointed at me. In front of relatives, neighbors, coworkers, and the pastor, my mother said, if she hadn't walked away from this family, he'd still be alive. My father nodded like it was a fact, not grief talking. 40 people turned in the pews to stare at me like I had blood on my hands. They said I abandoned him, that I cared more about my career than my own brother, that I was the reason he spiraled. They turned a funeral into a public trial, and I was the defendant standing 3 feet from the casket. What they didn't expect was that I wasn't going to stay silent anymore, because the truth about my brother, and about them, was something they had spent years trying to bury. I stood in the back of the church, 3 feet from my brother's casket, and watched my mother point at me like I was the reason he was in it. The service had just ended. People were still drying their eyes, still murmuring their condolences, still pretending this was a normal funeral. Then my mother walked to the podium, took the microphone from the pastor, and cleared her throat. I have something to say, something that needs to be said. The room went quiet. 40 people turned to face her. I stayed in the back, near the doors, already knowing whatever came next would be bad. My mother looked directly at me. Her eyes were dry, not a tear in sight. My daughter stopped coming home 3 years ago. She stopped calling, stopped checking in, stopped being part of this family. And my son, my beautiful boy, he felt that abandonment every single day. A woman near the front gasped. Someone whispered my name like it was a curse. My father stood up and joined her at the podium. He put his arm around her, supportive, united, the picture of grieving parents. She chose her career over him, my father added. She chose her life over his, and now he's gone, and she has to live with that. 40 faces turned toward me, 40 sets of eyes, some curious, some judgmental, some already convinced I was a monster. My Aunt Helen pressed a tissue to her mouth like she might be sick. My Uncle Mark shook his head slowly, disappointment etched into every line of his face. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. My mother wasn't finished. If she hadn't walked away, maybe he'd still be here. Maybe he'd have fought harder. Maybe he'd have had a reason to keep going. She handed the microphone back to the pastor and sat down, head bowed, accepting the sympathetic touches of the people around her. My father sat beside her, holding her hand. The pastor mumbled something about grief making people say things they don't mean, but everyone knew, everyone believed. I stood frozen in the back, my brother's casket between us, and felt the weight of 40 people's judgment pressing down on my chest. The reception was in the church basement, folding tables, plastic cups, trays of cookies that no one really wanted. I stood against the wall, holding a cup of punch I had no intention of drinking, watching the people who had just watched my parents destroy me. My Aunt Margaret found me first, not the one who gasped, the other one. Your mother is heartbroken. No hello, no how are you, just accusation disguised as concern. I know she is. She's saying things she doesn't mean. Grief does that to people. I looked at her. She meant every word. Aunt Margaret's face tightened. You could at least pretend to care. You flew 600 miles for this. The least you could do is act like you're sad. I am sad. I'm devastated. My brother is dead. Then why aren't you crying? Why aren't you with your family? I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. How could I explain that my family had just used my brother's funeral to publicly execute me? How could I make her understand that the people she felt sorry for were the same people who had spent years destroying us? She walked away before I could find words. I stayed against that wall for another hour, watching the people who hated me laugh and eat and share stories about my brother. Stories they got to tell because they were the good ones, the ones who stayed, the ones who didn't abandon. Around 4 p.m., I slipped out a side door and walked to my rental car, sat in the driver's seat with my hands on the wheel, staring at nothing, feeling everything. My brother was gone. My parents had just made sure I'd never be welcome in this family again, and 40 people now believed I was a monster. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the envelope. It was thick, old, worn at the edges from how many times I'd touched it over the past 3 years. My brother's handwriting on the front, for Sarah, open when I'm gone. He'd given it to me the last time I saw him alive. 3 years ago, he showed up at my apartment at 2 a.m., drunk and crying, and told me things I still couldn't fully process. Things about our childhood, about our parents, about the version of our family I'd been too blind to see. "Read this if anything happens to me," he said. "Promise me you won't open it before. Promise me." I promised. I tore the envelope open with shaking hands. Inside were letters, dozens of them, dating back years. Letters my brother had written to me but never sent. Letters about the abuse we endured as children. Letters about the times our parents hit him, screamed at him, locked him in his room for days. Letters about the things they did that I had somehow blocked from memory. And underneath the letters, a smaller envelope, sealed, my grandmother's handwriting on the front. I opened it. Inside was a single page dated 10 years ago, a letter my grandmother wrote before she died to be opened by me if anything ever happened to my brother. "My darling Sarah, if you're reading this, something terrible has happened to your brother, and I need you to know the truth. I saw what they did to him. I saw what they did to both of you. I tried to stop them, but I was old and weak, and they wouldn't listen. Before I died, I put money aside, a lot of money. Enough for both of you to start over, enough to escape. I told your brother about it, but I never got to tell you. The account is in your name, all of it. Use it to get away. Use it to heal. Use it to tell the world what they did. I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. Grandma." I read it 3 times, then a 4th. The paper trembled in my hands. My parents had spent years making me feel guilty for leaving. They'd just spent my brother's funeral convincing 40 people I was a monster. They'd built their entire lives on lies and manipulation. But my grandmother had seen it. She'd known, and she'd left me the one thing they could never take: proof. And money, enough money to make sure they never hurt anyone again. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in my pocket. Then I started the car and drove away from that church, away from those people, away from everything I'd ever known. I wasn't running anymore. I was just getting started. I drove for an hour before I pulled over. Just needed to stop, needed to breathe, needed to read those letters again without the church watching. I found a small diner off the highway, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that's been sitting too long. I ordered a cup I didn't want and spread my brother's letters across the sticky table. Page after page, year after year. He'd been writing to me since we were kids, even though he never sent any of them. Some were angry, some were sad, some were just confused, trying to understand why our parents were the way they were. But the later ones were different, clearer. He'd found a therapist who helped him piece it together. He'd started remembering things he'd blocked out, things I'd blocked out too. "Sarah, do you remember the winter Dad locked me in the basement? I was 7. I wet myself because there was no bathroom down there. Mom let him do it. I finally understand why you left. You were smart. You got out before they could break you completely. I'm not mad. I'm proud. If anything happens to me, don't let them blame you. Promise me you won't let them make you the villain. I've been telling people the truth. I've been telling anyone who will listen. I don't know if it matters, but I've been trying." I read that last one 3 times. He'd been telling people for years, and no one listened, or no one believed him, or they believed him and did nothing. My phone buzzed. "Chloe, where are you? Everyone's looking for you. Aunt Margaret is saying you stormed out like a child." I typed back, "Let them talk." "Sarah, what happened? Your parents are playing the victims hard. People are believing them." I looked at the letters spread across the table, at the proof in front of me. I have something. Something that changes everything. Can you meet me? Chloe found me at the diner an hour later. She slid into the booth across from me, took one look at my face, and grabbed my hands. Talk. I told her everything. The letters, the money, my grandmother's letter, the years of abuse I'd blocked out and my brother had documented. Chloe didn't interrupt, didn't gasp or cry or do any of the things people do in movies. She just listened, her face getting harder and harder as I talked. When I finished, she sat back and stared at the table for a long moment. Your grandmother left you money? How much? I pulled out the letter and showed her. Chloe's eyes went wide. Sarah, that's a lot of money, like life-changing money. I don't care about the money. I know, but you should, because money means options. It means lawyers. It means private investigators. It means you can fight back in ways they can't. I looked at her. What are you saying? I'm saying your parents just publicly blamed you for your brother's death in front of 40 people. They've spent years lying about what happened in that house, and now you have proof, not just of the abuse, but of their lies. She leaned forward. You can destroy them, Sarah, not for revenge, for justice, for your brother, for every kid who grows up in a house like yours and doesn't make it out. We spent the next 3 days at Chloe's apartment, going through every letter, every document, every piece of evidence my brother had left behind. We scanned everything, made copies, organized it into a timeline that stretched back 30 years. On the third day, I called a lawyer, not the family lawyer, who my parents had known for decades, someone new, someone recommended by Chloe's friend who handled abuse cases. Her name was Rebecca, same lawyer I'd had before, different cases. She listened to everything, asked questions, took notes. When she finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Your brother was in therapy? For years. I have copies of his records. His therapist believed him. Did he ever report the abuse to authorities? He tried when he was 15. They came to the house, talked to my parents, and left. My parents were very good at playing the perfect family. Rebecca nodded slowly. That's common. Abusers often are. But the fact that there was a report means there's a record. Even if nothing came of it, it exists. She flipped through her notes. And your grandmother's letter, she mentions putting money aside for you and your brother. Do you have access to that account? I don't even know where to start looking. Start with her bank. If she left you money, there's a paper trail. We can find it. I nodded, felt something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. The funeral had been a week ago. My parents had called 17 times. I'd let every call go to voicemail. Their messages shifted from angry to confused to desperate to angry again. You need to come home and face your family. People are talking. You're making yourself look guilty. If you don't call us back, we'll assume you've made your choice. I saved every one. Then my Aunt Margaret called, not Chloe's mom, the other one, the one who judged me at the reception. Sarah, I'm only going to say this once. Her voice was cold, formal. Your parents are devastated. Your behavior at the funeral was disgraceful, and your refusal to speak to them since is proof of exactly what kind of person you are. I listened, didn't interrupt. The family is talking, and we've all decided that until you apologize to your mother and father, you're not welcome at any family gatherings. Christmas is 2 months. Don't bother coming. I didn't do anything wrong. That's exactly what someone who did something wrong would say. She hung up. I sat in Chloe's apartment, phone in my hand, and felt the last thread connecting me to my family snap. Chloe came in with coffee, took one look at my face, and sat down beside me. What happened? I told her. She listened, nodded, and sat down beside me. Good, she said. I blinked. Good? Now you know. Now there's no ambiguity, no hoping they'll come around, no pretending any of this can be fixed. They've made their choice. You get to make yours. I looked at her. What's my choice? She smiled. You burn them to the ground. 2 weeks later, I walked back into that same church basement. Not for a funeral this time, for a family meeting my Aunt Margaret had called. To heal, she said, to bring everyone together and move forward. I knew what it really was, an intervention, a chance for my parents to play the victims again, and for everyone to watch me apologize. Chloe came with me. She sat in the back, phone ready to record just in case. The room was full. Same folding tables, same plastic cups, same 40 faces all turned toward me when I walked in. This time, I didn't stand against the wall. I walked to the front and faced them. My parents sat in the center, surrounded by aunts and uncles, the picture of wounded parents waiting for their wayward daughter to see the light. My mother spoke first. "Sarah, thank you for coming. We've been so worried." "I'm sure you have." My father stood up. "We're here to heal this family, to put the past behind us. Your behavior at the funeral was my behavior? You stood at my brother's casket and blamed me for his death, in front of everyone. You made me the villain at my own brother's funeral." Murmurs rippled through the room. My Aunt Margaret shifted in her seat. My mother's eyes filled with practiced tears. "We were grieving. We said things we didn't mean. That's what grief does." "No, that's what you do. You've been doing it my whole life." My father stepped forward, his voice dropping to that cold, controlled tone I remembered from childhood. "Sarah, don't make this worse. Apologize and we can move on." I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick stack of papers. "I'm not here to apologize. I'm here to tell the truth." I held up the first letter, my brother's handwriting visible from across the room. "These are letters my brother wrote to me over 20 years, letters he never sent, letters about what really happened in that house." My mother's face went pale. "In these letters, he describes the abuse, the beatings, the times Dad locked him in the basement, the times Mom told him he was worthless, that he'd never amount to anything, that he was the reason our family was so unhappy." The room went silent. No one moved. I held up another page. "This is a report when he was 15. He called the police, tried to report what was happening. They came to the house, talked to you, and left. Nothing happened, because you were very good at lying." My father's jaw tightened. "This is ridiculous. You're making things up to—" "I'm not making anything up." I pulled out my grandmother's letter, and neither was Grandma. I read it aloud, every word, about what she saw, about the money she left us, about her hope that someday we'd escape. When I finished, the room was dead quiet. My Aunt Margaret had tears running down her face. My Uncle Mark stared at my parents like he'd never seen them before. My mother stood up, shaking. This is lies, all of it. Your grandmother was senile at the end. She didn't know what she was writing." "Senile?" I pulled out bank statements, then explained the account in my name with $200,000 in it, opened 10 years ago, long before she was senile. My father grabbed my mother's arm. "We're leaving. This is insane." "Sit down." My voice was sharp, commanding. "You've spent my whole life telling people what to think about me. Now everyone gets to see the truth." I turned to the room, to the 40 people who had watched me crucified at my brother's funeral. I didn't abandon my brother. I believed him. When he told me what was happening, I believed him. And when I confronted them, they kicked me out, made me the villain, spent years telling anyone who would listen that I was selfish, that I didn't care, that I walked away for no reason. My Aunt Margaret was crying openly now. My brother kept trying. He kept telling people, kept going to therapy, kept trying to make someone understand. And no one listened. No one believed him. No one helped. I looked at my parents, at the 2 people who destroyed us. He's dead because of you, not because I left, because you spent his whole life breaking him. And when he finally tried to tell the truth, no one would hear it. My mother collapsed into her chair. My father stood frozen. I gathered my papers, put them back in my bag. "I'm not here for an apology. I don't want one.
I'm here so everyone knows, so my brother's truth finally gets heard, and so none of you ever look at me and wonder if I'm the monster they said I was." I walked out. Chloe followed. Behind us, the room erupted. 6 months later, I stood on a beach in California. The ocean stretched out in front of me, endless and blue. My grandmother's money had paid for this trip, for therapy, for a fresh start. My phone buzzed. "Chloe, you're not gonna believe this. Aunt Margaret called. The family is splitting. Half of them are on your side now. The other half are still defending your parents. It's a war." I smiled, typed back, "Not my war anymore." "What about your parents?" I thought about them, about the letters I still had, about the police report I'd filed with Rebecca's help, about the investigation that was slowly, quietly building a case. Let the law handle them. I'm done. I put my phone away and walked toward the water. The waves washed over my feet, cold and clean. My brother's ashes were in a small box in my bag. I'd brought him here because he always wanted to see the ocean, always talked about running away to California, starting over, becoming someone new. He never got the chance. I opened the box and scattered his ashes into the waves. "Rest now," I whispered. "You're free." The water carried him away. And for the first time in my life, I felt like maybe I could be free too. Would you have confronted them publicly or stayed silent? Comment below. Is it ever worth going back to a family that hurt you? Subscribe for more stories about truth, justice, and walking away.